Namaste, hello, adab. Today I have a wonderful guest who is sitting right here. Very pretty, smiling. She's none other than Neelima Penumarti, and she's the director of London-based Story Hour UK. Well, Story Hour's aim is to connect cultures. Story Hour produces timeless stories from India through 1 hour-long audiobooks and also short puppets shows. Uniquely, Neelima ji works with teenagers as authors and narrators. The audiobooks on Ramayana and Indian independence received glowing reviews in leading newspapers as well. And yes, she has, she has been appreciated by a lot of authors and a lot of people, a lot of famous people right here. And their flagship Ramayana puppet show conveys the Diwali story in just 20 minutes, and it was featured on prominent media platforms as well. And yes, so she's right here with us. Well, they say that the universe is made of stories and not atoms. Let's listen to everything from how her journey started, being a Hyderabadi, and then all the way to London, and what is her story. Hello, Neelima ma'am. How are you?
Hi, Jayashree. So good to speak to you. Chala bagunnanu. I'm feeling good.
Same here. Thank you so much. And well, ma'am, you're born in Hyderabad. You're a Pakka Hyderabadi.
Yes, I am.
And then moved to London in 1996.
Yes.
And Story Hour. And you're a chemistry student. And from there, storytelling. How did it all start?
As you had mentioned, so I did leave to London in 1996 on a prestigious British Chevening scholarship to pursue MSc in chemistry at Imperial College. And my husband came, he went to London as well on the same scholarship to study finance at London School of Economics. And we ended up staying there and having a family. And we have 2 boys. While when I had the first boy, I transitioned into software development, worked for 5 years. Then I had my second child.
Right.
When I had my second child, I decided to sort of not work and stay at home and look after the boys.
So did he inspire you to start storytelling or something?
So the boys did. So as a full-time mother, when you take your, like anything else, when you take your life, when you start enjoying your life and enjoying being a mother, part of the enjoyment is also telling stories.
Yes.
So I had enjoyed lots of some small stories, watching things like Peppa Pig with the boys, something very simple, gentle, and obviously conveying stories from India to the boys, like the Panchatantra, Ramayana, Mahabharata, and various Akbar Birbal stories. So storytelling had become a part of my being as a mother.
Right.
And through that started the journey.
Oh, wonderful. So when you went to London, did you see any did you see any culture difference that you want to, because connecting cultures is so interesting, and did you see any difference, and how did you come up with this connecting cultures aspect?
So in fact, if anything, I saw a lot of appreciation for stories from different cultures, because when the boys started going to school, what happened was the major religious festivals are celebrated at schools. And parents from that background are called to talk about that festival. So I was called to talk about Diwali.
Right.
And a part of the Ramayana is also introduced in the run-up to Diwali in schools in England.
Wonderful. That's really
So
nice.
the Ramayana journey started because the boys, in fact, had done skits and storyboards at their schools in London. And therefore, I thought, why not have an audiobook on the Ramayana?
How beautiful that is. We will talk more about what exactly Story Hour is, right? We'll talk more about your journey, and we will talk more about stories themselves. Ma'am, what is Story Hour UK? How did you what is it all about? I just wanted to know.
So Story Hour UK is a platform through which we convey stories, long stories, or any bunch of stories in an hour. So, for example, our first title was on the Ramayana because, as I mentioned previously, my 2 sons had decided to write their own version of the Ramayana. It's not their own retelling of the Ramayana. I shouldn't say version. It's a retelling of the Ramayana. And around that time, I realized I thought as a producer, I'd want to introduce the story to the world in English.
Right.
So because, as I mentioned previously, the story is heard in most schools in England. So most people of different faiths do know Rama and Sita, etc. And because it's a story behind Diwali as well. That's how it is communicated. So yeah, so that was one story, and then short stories. So my recently had produced another audiobook which is about communicating short stories to convey Telugu Samitalu. So I thought the length of the audiobook should be an hour, whether it's a long story like the Ramayana or the Indian independence, which should be conveyed within an hour, or if it is short stories, there are only those many stories, so that which when you put together becomes an hour long audiobook.
Right. So తెలుగు సామెతలు అంటే ఇక్కడ నేను చదువుతున్నాను కూడా వెబ్సైట్లో, మీ వెబ్సైట్లో తాతమ్మ కథలు అని కూడా ఉంది. సో దాని గురించి కొంచెం చెప్పండి.
సో చిన్నప్పుడు ఆబ్వియస్గా తెలుగు ఫ్యామిలీలో పుట్టి పెరిగి సామెతలు మా భాషలో ఎప్పుడు యూజ్ చేయడం జరుగుతుంది చాలా రెగ్యులర్గా. సో నేను చాలా ఎంజాయ్ చేశాను. అంటే ఫస్ట్లీ ఆ ఫ్రేజెస్ అన్నీ చాలా ఇంట్రెస్టింగ్గా ఉంటాయి, ఒక చిన్న స్టోరీలా ఉంటాయి. దాంతో ఎనీవే సామెత అంటే ఒక చిన్న విదిన్ అ ఫ్యూ వర్డ్స్ ఎక్స్ప్రెసింగ్ బిగ్ మెసేజ్. మెసేజ్. సో కోవిడ్ టైంలో నాకు అనిపించింది మా ఫ్యామిలీ మెంబర్స్, సో మా అమ్మ, మా అత్తగారు అండ్ మై అంకుల్స్ అండ్ ఆంట్స్, వాళ్ళందరికీ ఆస్తాం మీరు ఒక్కొక్కళ్ళు 2 సామెతల మీద స్టోరీస్ రాస్తే చిన్నగా, అది 5 నిమిషాలే నెరేట్ చేస్తే ఆ జనరేషన్స్ టు హెడ్ వాళ్ళకి ఆ స్టోరీస్ ద్వారా సామెతల మీనింగ్ అర్థమవుతుంది. సో ఎవ్రీడే కాంటెక్స్ట్ యూస్ చేసి ఆ సామెత మీనింగ్, అంటే అడిగితే కానీ అమ్మాయినా పెట్టదు, తింటే కానీ రుచి, దిగితే కానీ లోతు, ఇవన్నీ చాలా స్వీట్ సామెతలు. సో ఐ థాట్ ఇది మన రోజు యూసేజ్లో ఉంటే బాగుంటుంది. సో నెక్స్ట్ జనరేషన్, ఆ జనరేషన్స్ టు కమ్ ఎలా యూజ్ చేయాలి. సో అప్పుడప్పుడు పేరెంట్స్కి ఇవన్నీ చెప్పే ఓపిక ఉండకపోవచ్చు, బికాస్ లైఫ్ చాలా బిజీగా ఉంటుంది. సో ఈ స్టోరీస్ మేము రికార్డ్ చేయడం వల్ల వాళ్ళు రాత్రి అది ఒక బెడ్ టైమ్ స్టోరీలా వినొచ్చు, వాళ్ళకి పక్కన ఎవరు చెప్పినా చెప్పకపోయినా.
అండ్ ఇఫ్ ఒక మారల్ లెసన్స్ లా కూడా, మారల్స్ లా కూడా, మన పంచతంత్ర కథల్లాగా దాని నుంచి మనం నేర్చుకునేది కూడా ఉంటుంది. సో వెరీ బ్యూటిఫుల్, వెరీ బ్యూటిఫుల్. అండ్ సో ఇంకా ఈ స్టోరీ ఆర్ యూకే చాలా సక్సెస్ఫుల్ అని విన్నాము. దీని సక్సెస్ వెనకల వాట్ ఈస్ ద హార్డ్ వర్క్ దట్ యువ్ పుట్ ఇన్?
ఐ థింక్ సక్సెస్, థ్యాంక్ యూ సో మచ్ ఫర్ సేయింగ్ దాట్. ఇది మోస్ట్లీ నాకు నచ్చింది ఏంటంటే కంప్లీట్లీ దే ఆర్ నాట్ ప్రొఫెషనల్ రైటర్స్. ఇప్పుడు ఎవరైతే టీనేజర్స్తో నేను పనిచేశానో వాళ్ళకి ఒక టాస్క్ ఇచ్చాను, నేను యాజ్ అ ప్రొడ్యూసర్ ఒక టాస్క్ ఇచ్చాను, మీరు ఈ టాపిక్ మీద మీరు రాయాలి అని. సో వాళ్ళు అది రీసెర్చ్ చేసి దాన్ని ఆబ్వియస్గా మనం ఒకవేళ టైం లిమిట్ పెట్టకపోతే వాళ్ళు ఎంతసేపు అయినా మాట్లాడచ్చు, ఎంతసేపు అయినా రాయొచ్చు. కానీ నేను టైం లిమిట్ పెట్టాను. జస్ట్ లైక్ ఇన్ ఎగ్జామ్, ఇఫ్ యూ హ్యావ్ టు రైట్ ఇన్ 200 words, యూ హ్యావ్ నో చాయిస్ బట్ టు రైట్ ఇన్ 200 words కదా. సో సిమిలర్లీ ఐ సెడ్ మీరు రాసింది నరేట్ చేసినప్పుడు అది 1 hour గానే ఉండాలి అని. సో this journey started with my 2 sons, Shreyas and Ayur. So వాళ్ళకి ఆ రామాయణ అంత షార్ట్ ఫామ్లో రాయడం ఛాలెంజింగ్గానే ఉండింది, ఎందుకంటే ఎన్నో సబ్ ప్లాట్స్ ఉంటాయి, అవన్నీ కూడా కవర్ చెయ్యాలా చేయకూడదా, ప్లస్ మోడర్న్ లాంగ్వేజ్ యూజ్ చేసి అంటే వాళ్ళకి ఎలా నచ్చుతుందో ఒక కథ వినడం, వాళ్ళు ఆ స్టైల్లో రాశారు. సో వాళ్ళది నరేట్ చేయడంతో వాళ్ళకి ఏం అర్థమైందంటే వాళ్ళలోని స్టోరీ టెల్లర్, ప్రతి మనిషిలోని స్టోరీ టెల్లర్ ఉంటారు. ఐ థింక్ దే రియలైజ్డ్ ద స్టోరీ టెల్లర్ ఇన్ దెమ్సెల్వ్స్. అండ్ సో నేను that was the beginning, and from then on I've only worked with teenagers and the elderly as my narrators and writers, and that's been incredible. So వీళ్ళెవరు ప్రొఫెషనల్ నరేటర్స్ కాదు, ప్రొఫెషనల్ రైటర్స్ కాదు, కానీ అందరం కథలు విన్నవాళ్ళమే, అందరం కథలు అప్రిషియేట్ చేసేవాళ్ళమే. సో వాళ్ళల్లో టాస్క్ ఇచ్చేసరికి ఎవ్రీబడి హ్యాస్ రిజన్ టు ది అకేషన్. అందరూ ఆ ఛాలెంజ్ తీసుకుని ఆ స్టైల్లో నరేట్ చేయడం నేర్చుకున్నారు, which was absolutely satisfying. So
UK lo ela undi response ఇప్పుడు మీరు రామాయణ and brief history of
so Ramayana audio book aithe, as I mentioned, it was featured in some of the top newspapers in England. So వాళ్ళకి యాక్చువల్లీ చాలా నచ్చింది, ఎందుకంటే ఇది అంటే మన పేర్లు, మన కాంటెక్స్ట్ అదంతా వాళ్ళకి కొంచెం తెలియదు కదా. సో వాళ్ళని మరీ కాంప్లికేట్ చేయకుండా, పిల్లలు ఎలా రాస్తారంటే అది మరీ కాంప్లికేటెడ్గా కాకుండా సింపుల్ స్ట్రక్చర్తో స్టోరీ కన్వే, అదొక స్టోరీ లాగా ఉంటుంది, సూదింగ్ గా ఇట్ గోస్ ఫ్రమ్ వన్ చాప్టర్ టు ది అదర్. ఎగ్జాక్ట్లీ, ఎస్ ఎగ్జాక్ట్లీ. సో అది వాళ్ళకి అసలు టీడియస్ గా అనిపించకుండా ఈజీగా వాళ్ళది ఆ నరేషన్ పికప్ చేసుకునేలా ఉండింది. అందుకోసం దే యాక్చువల్లీ లవ్డ్ ఇట్. ఫర్ దెమ్ దిస్ వాజ్ ద ఫస్ట్ exposure to the Ramayanas. Very brief. Obviously, ఎన్నో కాంటెక్స్ట్లు వాళ్ళు కవర్ చేయలేకపోయారు పిల్లలు, బికాస్ యాజ్ ఐ మెన్షన్డ్ ఆ ఆడియో బుక్ ఒక గంటలో ఉండాలి. బట్ వాట్ యాక్చువల్లీ డిడ్ ఎక్సీడింగ్లీ వెల్ వాజ్ ద పపెట్ షో. సో
అవును, తోలుబొమ్మలాట ఆర్ పపెట్ షో అంటాము. సో దీన్ని కూడా మీరు దీని మీద ప్రయోగాలు చేశారు. యూ డిడ్ లాట్ ఆఫ్ ఎక్స్పెరిమెంటేషన్ అండ్ యూ created shows on it. Can you tell us more about it?
So నాకు ఇన్ఫ్యాక్ట్ I was growing up in India. నేను మన టైంలో నా చిన్నతనంలో when రామానంద్ సాగర్ రామాయణ వచ్చినప్పుడు నాకు I thought it was a unifying force. అంటే somehow నాకు అది మొత్తం కంట్రీ I felt it came to a standstill.
Definitely.
అందరూ టీవీ చూసి దాని తర్వాత మర్నాడు అది డిస్కస్ చేసి, even though everybody knows the Ramayana.
We used to wait for that breakfast and everything ready.
Exactly. అందరికీ తెలుసు ఆ నెక్స్ట్ ఎపిసోడ్ లో ఏమవుతుంది అని, కానీ ఆ ఎక్సైట్మెంట్ జనరేట్ చేయగలిగారు. అండ్ యాజ్ ఎ నేషన్ ఇట్ వాజ్ అ కలెక్టివ్ ఎక్స్పీరియన్స్. అది నాకు చాలా ఆ పర్టికులర్ ఫేజ్ నాకు చాలా ఇంప్రెస్ చేసింది. అంటే ఒక నేషన్ని ఒక స్టోరీ ద్వారా ఎలా బైండ్ చేయొచ్చు అని. ఇట్ వాజ్ షియర్ స్టోరీ టెల్లింగ్, రైట్, ఆ ప్రొడక్షన్. సో అది ఆ ధోరణితో నేను అనుకున్నాను, ఇఫ్ దెర్ వాజ్ అన్ ఆడియో బుక్ అండ్ ఇఫ్ దెర్ వాజ్ అ విజువల్ రిప్రజెంటేషన్ ఆఫ్ ద స్టోరీ, బికాస్ మై వర్క్ ఈజ్ ఫర్ ద వరల్డ్.
Yes.
In a simple way. Obviously it's not tedious, complicated kuda kaadu. So andukosam appudu naaku anpichindi what is the best way to convey it visually.
Ma'am, so more insight about the puppet shows that is a part of Story Hour.
So as I mentioned previously, so I thought I should add a visual angle to the audiobook which is on the Ramayana. And reason being, as again I mentioned previously, it is a story that is covered along with many other stories from different faiths. This is a story that is covered, a part of it, in most schools in England, either through storytelling or through skits, drama, etc., etc. So when I was exploring how to communicate this, I realized, I mean, again, being a mother of two boys, as I was bringing them up, I saw a lot of puppet shows with my two sons. And I thought they were absolutely fascinating, because the difference I felt between a people-based drama and a puppet-based drama is, especially the kind of European style they have, is that puppets don't change their expression, right?
Yes.
So it is through the voice and the atmosphere you create for the show, for the production, the music, which draws you into that story, and you end up seeing that emotion in a wooden puppet.
Right.
And I found that fascinating. When I watched a lot of puppet shows, I thought I was so engrossed in those shows. Despite the puppet not changing its expression, I saw that sadness, I saw that happiness, I saw a range of emotions on the puppet. So then I had reached out to puppeteers, puppet makers, puppet directors in London, and a very experienced puppet director called Jilly Robick, who actually grew up for the first 10 years of her life in Mumbai. She was very, very keen to work on this project.
So she's also worked in Mumbai on puppet.
No, she grew up. I mean, she's now probably 75, 76.
Okay.
But the first 10 years of her life, she grew up in India. And she obviously knows all the big stories from India, from all faiths.
Back then, if it's 75 years ago, then it was close to independence. Right?
Yeah.
And back then, independent stories were told through puppets as well. A lot of, I can connect the dots.
Yeah, so the puppets, so then she started doing the drawings, and then she put me in touch with a puppet maker. So all the puppets I have are made out of wood.
Okay.
So a Czechoslovakian puppet...
Eco-friendly.
Yeah, absolutely. A Czechoslovakian puppet maker carved the puppets. So an English puppet maker carved the puppets. So the team behind the puppet show is totally English. And I was very happy about it, only because, as I said, I want to communicate stories from India to the world. And the best way to communicate is to get them involved.
Right.
Right? So to your question, the puppet shows have been received absolutely wonderfully because the puppets are so expressive.
So
their
are
costumes.
they dressed in our Indian attire?
In fact, going to, yes, they are very much, and it's been 5 years since they've been wearing the same clothes. So in fact, this year I'm working with the National Institute of Fashion Technology here in Hyderabad, a young fashion designer
To give
called,
them a makeover?
yeah, a young fashion designer called Gautami Dhawan has designed new costumes for the puppets, which I'm taking the designs to London, and 2 students from one of the fashion schools in London are actually going to make it. So when I'm saying connecting cultures, I hope you're able to understand that through one story, I'm bringing in people from all walks of life
Right.
and from different backgrounds, and they're all coming together to make this story, to communicate this story beautifully.
Just with one aim, that is
Yeah.
to make our culture
Yeah.
known to the world.
And
Creating
also, see, I firmly believe that if I know you and your story, I appreciate you better. Otherwise, I might look at you and I might have some prejudice. I might say, oh, this, that, or the other. But once you and I share our stories with each other, we feel we are part of each other's lives a lot more than we would if we had not known each other's stories. So
Right.
by me communicating that this is what is one of the biggest stories from India, people are more, I feel they'll feel closer to India.
Yes.
So I definitely feel stories are a beautiful way, a gentle way to communicate a culture.
What a proud thing to say. What a proud aspect where so many people are coming together to connect cultures. And जी हाँ, हमारा कल्चर बहुत ही रिस्पेक्ट किया जाता है यहाँ पे, अब्रॉड पे, और कल्चर को कनेक्ट करने के लिए स्टोरी आर यूके ने जन्म लिया। और नीलिमा जी यहाँ पर हमारे साथ रूबरू हो रही हैं और बता रही हैं कि स्टोरी आर यूके के बारे में। और ये जो माध्यम है, जो स्टोरीज बनाने का, ऑडियो बुक्स का माध्यम है, मैंने उनसे पूछा कि क्यों सिर्फ ऑडियो बुक्स, क्योंकि आजकल के ज़माने में हम फ़ोन में स्क्रॉल कर रहे हैं, बहुत सारे वीडियोस देख रहे हैं और वीडियोस बहुत काफ़ी फेमस हो रही हैं, लेकिन ऑडियो का क्या है इंटेंशन की ऑडियो बुक्स प्रोड्यूस करने का? मैम, कुड यू जस्ट गिव अस एन इनसाइट ओवर दैट?
See, what happens is, of course, yes, visual stimulation is fantastic, but I think there's something calm and something very, very engaging about audio. And as I said, this is for children because not everybody is blessed to have people around them who speak in very good language. So I think audiobooks are a very good medium where whoever is listening can understand how to construct a sentence. They can pick up some new words. They can pick up pronunciation. They can pick up diction, pauses. So I feel an audiobook is actually an educational tool, depending on the story, because while you're listening, you're picking up, as I said, all these aspects of language, right? And I also feel audiobooks are a wonderful way to engage the visually impaired.
Right.
And I have worked with the visually impaired for 2 of our audiobooks. The Hindi version of our Ramayana audiobook was translated by our Hindi teacher from Kendriya Vidyalaya Uppal, and 6 children from Kendriya Vidyalaya Uppal, that is where I studied. And the Telugu audiobook, which my mother, Jahnavi Penumarti, she translated it into Telugu.
Wonderful.
And 3 extremely talented children from Devnar Institute for Blind have narrated it. So I feel these audiobooks give the visually impaired an immense chance to use their voice to narrate stories.
Right.
And I also, my latest audiobook on the Indian independence, which was written and narrated by, one of them is my sons, Ayur, and another boy called Arush from Hyderabad. They worked together over during COVID period, and they produced an hour-long audiobook that conveys India's independence. The Hindi version, I worked with the Blind Relief Association, 2 students from the Blind Relief Association in Delhi. Extremely talented children.
Right.
So I feel audiobooks give, as I said, they're educational tools, as well as they also empower the visually impaired to use their voice to create a vocation for themselves.
Right.
So I feel, audiobooks is the way to go for me. At least.
Wonderful. I think nowadays, if we take radio as a medium,
Yeah.
radio is not going anywhere.
Absolutely.
It's right here. It was there. It is here, and it will be.
Yeah.
Because I think probably multitasking has grown in people while driving or listening and working.
Actually, you're right.
Yeah.
Yes. Also, when you're walking or
Right.
people who are doing some domestic chores, instead of where you can't be glued to a screen,
Right.
you could just put in your earphones and you could engage yourself in something constructive.
Absolutely.
Pick up something new while you're getting on with some mundane activities as well.
Right, and as a psychology student, I would say that a lot of therapists are suggesting audio rather than visual.
Okay.
So that
That's interesting.
It's healing and it's therapeutic, because children are developing a kind of visual autism.
Okay.
That's happening. So probably audio is advised mostly, and a wonderful way. And I see a lot of reviews right here on the website about A Brief History of Indian Independence. Would you want our listeners to also look at all this and on
Yes,
your website?
please. I think so. I have produced 6 titles so far, and all of them are free, and they can access it from my website, and all the puppet shows as well. In fact, I'd forgotten to mention. So the puppet show film.
Mm-hmm.
I had done live shows as well in London. I also produced it. I filmed it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the filmed version of the puppet show has voiceover in different languages, including European languages like French, German, Spanish, Italian.
Just
So-
to ensure that the reach goes on.
Yeah, and also, as I said, when I'm saying connecting cultures, so I worked with children, teenagers from those language schools, and they had to understand the story before they participated in our project and gave their voice as narrators. So they are getting to know a big story from India. They're getting to know India better. So through this endeavors of mine, I think connecting cultures is happening, and I'd really, I think if the audience if they want to understand my work, they could easily go to storyr.co.uk.
Storyr.co.uk is the website. Please go on to the website, and all the content is free. Where
yeah.
you can actually view the content in English, Hindi, Gujarati, French, German, Spanish, Italian, and British Sign Language as well.
Which is
That
for
is
the deaf.
interesting.
Yeah. So as I said, I thought in my mind, I thought, okay, I'd interacted with the visually impaired for the audiobooks as narrators. I felt I had to do something for the deaf community, hearing impaired community as well. So I worked with an interpreter from Brit who could interpret the puppet show in British Sign Language.
How beautifully inclusive is Storyr. Neelima garu maato ippudunaru. Neelima Penumarthi, who is a founder and director of Storyr UK. Ma'am, I want to know who are the people behind the success of Storyr UK?
There are many people. I have to thank a lot of people, to start with my sons, Shreyas and Ayur, for their English to get me started on this journey. And then the Hindi version, beautifully translated by Srimati Padmaja Srivatsav and directed by Sonali Maitri, and all the children from Kendriya Vidyalaya Uppal. My mother for translating it into Telugu, and the students from Devnar Institute for Blind for narrating it, and the staff there. The journey is forever. And Hindi Indian audiobook ki kuda Sharda Manocha garu chala manchiga adi translate chesaru. And obviously the children. And puppet shows kuda, I think I had a sponsor come in just the very next year.
That's wonderful. And so what are the future plans of Storyr UK?
So I want to produce more short stories in different languages and engage with the elderly as my writers and narrators, and also engage with teenagers. So I have a plan as to where I'll use the elderly and where I'll work with the teenagers. So
wonderful. We wish you all the best for every endeavor. And any last message that you want to give for our listeners for today's show?
I would only say ఐ థింక్ క్రియేటివ్ జర్నీని ఎప్పుడు అది మనం ఆపకూడదు. వాట్ ఎవర్ వీ థింక్ వీ హ్యావ్ అవర్ ప్యాషన్ ఫర్, ఐ థింక్ వీ షుడ్ పర్స్యూ ఇట్, బికాస్ you never know where it's going to lead.
Absolutely. Unleash your creativity.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Nilima ma'am, for being with us today. It was a pleasure knowing more about stories that you create or stories that you recreated for connecting cultures. Thank
Many
you so
thanks,
much.
Jayashree, and thank you All India Radio Hyderabad too.